On October 17th, 2023, the Brightmoor family's world was turned upside down when, at the age of just 44, a tumour was found in Angela's brain. 1 month later, they were introduced to the world that is hospice. This is Angela's story. Walking the final path together, a Hospice West Auckland podcast. Hello and welcome back to episode 4. Last episode we explored how Aron and Angela supported their children and their family through this journey. And this week we're going to talk about future care planning, how you had discussions and worked through all the things you needed to work through at this part of your journey. Today we are joined by Trish Fleming, who is one of our social workers by trade. But you also have multiple hats in this workplace. Welcome, Trish. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for inviting me, and thanks for having me be part of this story today.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
What is your title here?
It's community engagement. And as you said, I'm a social worker, and I've been in the palliative care space for nearly 20 years, talking with people about the myriad of things that need to be considered when families are facing a journey such as you did with Angela and your children.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Trish, you've been with Hospice West Auckland for a number of years and had your role as a social worker and then worked into these different roles as well, haven't you?
Yeah. So helping people to think about the things and put some plans in place. Things like advanced care planning, perhaps, things like wills, things like what our future goals and wishes are going to be, and thinking of all of that from a holistic sense and guiding people to walk through that process. Not things that people generally want to be thinking about, eh?
No,
But,
absolutely.
yeah. And there's a lot of stuff comes up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're exactly right, and it's stuff that you don't want to think about, but it's also stuff you've never thought about before. Like, there's so many people out there that they know that you should have a will,
yeah,
but they have no idea how to get one or what's actually involved, in things like that. And then, like you said before, like an advanced care plan, like
what is that?
What is that?
Yeah.
Like what does that even mean? So there was lots of stuff that, and especially for Andrew and I with a blended family, in wills and things like that, like what happens with all of that stuff. It's a lot. It's a lot to take on. While this other massive thing is kind of happening as well, it's like, oh, great. So we're dealing with this illness and the outcome of that. And then, hey, also there's a lot of admin that that we need you to kind of manage as well. So, yeah.
And a lot of the admin is things that you, like you said, you haven't thought about, but also you might not want to think about at the time when you're going through it, but it's equally just as important.
Yeah.
Trish, can you talk to us? You've mentioned, Aron, you've mentioned the word advanced care plan. What on earth is that?
Yeah, look, it's a holistic document that helps a person to think about what they would like to have happen for their care as their illness progresses. And not something that we want to it's a confronting thing to sit down and do, right?
Yeah.
I have developed a respect for the process more than the outcome, I think. That actually being together and being able to have the confronting conversations, but also to share, this is what I really wish for, which might be a surprise sometimes, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to go through that process and almost journey together. A little lady I met recently in a care home was telling me that she didn't want to sit down and do that. Why did you give me that book? But then she said she's been getting up each morning just in the quiet before the care home gets busy. She has a cup of tea and she has a little bit more of a look and a little bit more of a think. And then when her daughter comes to visit in the weekend, she shares, where she's got to. So, yeah, there is a thing about the process.
Yeah, and I mean, it was confronting enough for me, and I wasn't the one with the terminal illness, so I can only imagine, what it was like for Angela or anyone in that kind of situation, because you're kind of preempting this future that doesn't have a good outcome. You don't know when that is, but you're kind of expressing your final wishes. And I remember having a conversation with Angela very, very early on, and I think we just finished watching Afterlife, the Ricky Gervais series, with amazing, and a lot of that story is his wife obviously has cancer, but before she passes away, she's made him videos, and she's talking to him, and about what she wants for him, and all of those kinds of things. And so Angela and I had watched that long before her diagnosis, but when it kind of came around, and you have to be careful how you bring this up, because you don't want to be like, hey, like, you're going to die soon, like, let's talk about this. So and so I kind of said to her, like, is there anything that you'd like to do for the kids, for me, or for anybody? And we've seen the videos that Ricky Gervais's wife made, and she said, that's a great idea. I would like to do that. And so that's cool. We'll leave that there, and you just let me know, where you want to do that. And then as it kind of progressed, and as I could kind of see, that actually
things are
changing, and I said to her again, I said, have you had a chance to think about what you want to do and what you want to say, especially because the Taylor, our youngest, was 9 at the time. So what do you want to say? And I think she did lots of things, her funeral planning and things like that, where like I would struggle to do those things. But I think actually having to talk about and make a video to say goodbye, which is what she's doing. She found that really, really hard, and then obviously the decline kind of limited her on what and she wasn't able to do that. But just to be confronted with that and be like, I'm saying goodbye, and these, and even with the care plan, like, I'm writing down all the things that I need to happen for, and in some cases that I'm not even going to be here for, and that's full on.
I can imagine on one hand, it's really confronting to think and address, like you said, the inevitable. But on the other hand, it could bring you a sense of empowerment, being able to have that say of what's important to you, what matters, what you would and wouldn't like. Maybe some peace of mind for Angela's family as well, in terms of you being able to see what she's written and know, I'm doing the right thing because Angela's written that this is important to me.
And I think that's what that lovely lady was saying in the care home, that she's able to put her voice into that and have her say about what she wants to have happen. There's also been other situations where I've worked with families that there's been quite a difference of opinion, and so the advanced care plan, and it doesn't need to be that document, right? And you had advanced care planning conversations with her your own way, right? Because you felt it was important to elicit from her what she wanted so that you could support that. And I think it does help people if there is a difference of opinion or misunderstandings. It's like, oh, that's what Mum wants to have happen.
And so the big thing for us, the big thing for Angela actually was when it, and especially when it came to her funeral, right? So we were very lucky that a very good friend of ours is a funeral director, so we were able to approach her and have some conversations with her very early on, and this was guided by Angela and her, and so she would have those discussions, and when people found out that she was having those discussions and she was planning her funeral, some people were just like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Why are you doing that? You should be living life. You should be, and I remember being part of one of those conversations, and she said to the person, she said, hey, like, this is my life. This is my life now. Like, and what am I going to do? Not plan any of this and leave Aron, who now has, 4 kids and has just lost his wife. I'm going to let that to sort it out. Like, how was that fair, right? And so that was her driving goal. Did she want to do it? Maybe not, right? Because again, like, it's quite confronting. But the outcome of that, and for me as a person, I was so conscious of making sure that everything was right and the way and everything was the way that she wanted it to be, that, like, it was one of the best things that she did for us, and not only for her, because literally everything that happened at her funeral was what Angela wanted. The music, one of her favorite karaoke songs was Adele. We sang Adele, the whole, like, congregation, I guess you call it, whatever you call it, sang Adele awkwardly at first, but then, one kind of got into it. But that's what she wanted. And, so I remember, I thought I had it all, like, what she was, she chose what she was dressed in. Now, I wouldn't have chosen that for her, but that's what she wanted. And so, like, I was like, oh,
that was
okay,
a surprise.
well, that's good, okay, well, that's that sorted. And I remember getting to, she was at she'd passed away, and she was at the funeral home, and our funeral director said, well, Aron, what lipstick do you want? What colour lipstick do you want her to wear? No idea.
She didn't write that.
She didn't write that down. And so that was me going, what if I choose the wrong one? What am I going to do? In this state of, it's a few days after she's passed away.
Not wanting to get it wrong.
Not wanting to get it wrong, but she had, like I said, the music, the casket. Now, she'd always said, I just want a plain pine casket. I want all my friends and family and all the kids to, paint their hands and stamp their hands on it and write a message. So that's what we did. And that meant that for kind of 3-4 days after she passed away, our house was just full of people that just wanted to come and
be part of it.
Be part of it. So you had, so there was kind of almost this support during this really awful time. And so we got all of those benefits, but that was because that's what she wanted, and she didn't want to see the casket. So when we went to see where she was going to lie, we went and looked at it was called the cottage, and we went there when she was still here, and she was like, yeah, this is nice, and I'm okay with that. And then I remember the funeral director saying to us, do you want to see the casket? She was like, nope. Yeah. But this is what I want. And after that, then we went to the chapel, you call it. We went there, and I said to her, do you want to come inside? Nope. So she did have boundaries of, like, no, I don't need to see that bit. This is where I want it. This is how I want it to pan out. But I don't want to see it. But
how was it for you as Angela's husband going through that once she'd passed away and having
almost like a roadmap
that
she'd put together for you, right?
Just all of this, there was just no, I won't say there was no stress, because obviously you still, you still have to execute her plan, and you still want it to be right, but I don't have to think about it.
Wasn't a whole lot of choices because she'd made choices.
She'd done it. So, I had, together we had come up with all the playlists. So when, we both love music. So she had chosen songs and when they were going to happen and things like that. There was photo slideshows, and she'd been a part of that. She had the eulogy had been read to her, so she knew what was going to be said. I read my speech to her. I had a quiet before everyone got up in the morning, and I went and sat with her, and I said, "Do you want to hear what I'm going to say?" And it's one of the hardest things you have to do, but I wanted her to know.
Yeah.
And down the track, I've kind of thought about it now, and I always think, like, why don't we do it when they're here? Do you know what I mean? Like this celebration that they can be a part of. Like I think, and get to hear the amazing tributes that people
letting people know how important they are to us.
And we do it after they're gone. But no, it was a massive relief, and I think ultimately she did that. It said, like, it's confronting, and that's where she had her limits. No, I don't want to see the casket that I'm going to be in, but this is
I'm taking you this far.
I'm taking you this far, but ultimately, I think she was doing it for me, because she knew that there was already enough going on. I don't, if I can plan this and also have it the way I want it to be, then that's what I'll do. Yeah.
I'm thinking as well around, it sounds like you and Angela were able to have these open conversations and talk, as difficult and confronting as they were. You had the opportunity to do that. Trish, I imagine there are lots of scenarios where maybe it's not as open a conversation, or there are differing opinions.
Yeah.
How do you manage that when you're going in to support whānau?
I mean, that's an excellent question, particularly for those people who may not have someone to represent them. But also, and like Aron, you mentioned you have a blended family, you and Angela. Some people have blended families where there is a lot of difference of opinion.
Yeah.
And so being able to not necessarily get things down in a document, but at least facilitate conversations where you can represent the voice of the person, doesn't always go according to plan. But, another situation, Esther, that, needs to be talked about really is if somebody hasn't got capacity for their own decision making, and towards the end of somebody's life from illness, they usually will lose that ability. And so it is, it's desirable to have someone that you trust to represent your wishes and to speak for you, really. And often people will do that as an EPOA, enduring power of attorney. And it would be with that person that you would share your advanced care plan, if you'd completed it, or at least what you've written on the back of the survey, what it is that you want the conversations.
I like that, the back of the survey.
These are, this is what I want.
This is what's important.
And we, we were, before this all happened, we were those people that were like, we kind of have an idea of what's going to happen, what will happen with the kids. Well, they're probably going to be, they're probably going to be adults, and what does it really matter? And then when she got diagnosed, it was like, oh no, actually,
what are we going to do?
What are we going to do? And so we kind of had the bones of a will, and so these were all of the, I said, the admin things that now we had to go and get wills, and we had to go and get letters signed that said Angela is of sound mind to make these decisions. And while we didn't know it at the time, the clock was ticking, right? Because it was only going to be a few more weeks from when that was done that actually she wasn't going to be able to do that, and not that she wasn't, it was a sound mind, but she wasn't able to communicate or
That's
anything
right.
like that. So,
and medications impact people's thinking and frailty and fatigue and all sorts of things,
And the added complication for Angela was the time frame and how things progressed for her. And it makes me think around, I personally should be making these plans, or at least thinking about them and setting up a power of attorney now, so that if, God forbid, that happens, we've got things set up. Did Angela have a power of attorney?
Yep. So all of that was set up. So I was power of attorney, and and thankfully, like, it all just went, according to plan, and everything is kind of carrying on as it should be. We're quite lucky we didn't have those,
The bumps.
the bumps and
Yep.
disagreements, and the
Mm.
this is mine and that's yours and all of those kinds of things. So we don't, we kind of don't have that, and I think that's probably due to the age we are, and but yeah, so we had to go through all of that. We're very lucky that that we have a family member that is a lawyer, so we were able to kind of get that stuff done quite quickly.
Because that's a really complex minefield for people, and it's pretty anxiety invoking.
Well, also because we have a family member who is our lawyer, they were able to say, hey, you need to do this and you need to do this. Otherwise, if that was just me and Angela by ourselves without that, inside knowledge, I guess, those things wouldn't have happened. We just wouldn't have known. And again, they're kind of things that get, because Angela's illness is the core focus. Those things would have just got forgotten about. So we were really lucky that we had someone that was able to go, hey guys, we need to do this. The sound of the document to say that she's of sound mind. I would never have thought of that, and so actually, no, we need to do this and we need to do this. And, so we were really, really lucky there. Obviously not everyone is that lucky, but the other side of it is people, you don't know what you don't know.
No, and it is, when you sort of map out that kind of legal, medical, financial journey, admin requirements, I think you talked about, in the first instance, Aron, there's a lot. There's a lot to navigate, and people don't know because they're not, they don't need to know when they don't need to know.
Exactly. And we had some, I don't know if they're complexities, but Angela very early on wanted to donate her brain, as she wanted to donate organs and things like that. She didn't get to, because it's still quite a complex process, but we had to manage that as well and get our heads around, okay, well, how does that happen? Who do you contact, and all of those kinds of things. So yeah, it just becomes like an administrative minefield, and you're trying to respect this person's wishes and do the best that you can for them. Well, these two big trains are kind of rumbling on. There's the admin side, and we've talked before about the normal life carrying on as well. So you go and lump those in there, and it's very formative.
It becomes a whole nother facet of this really complicated care, medical, family life.
And how you're adjusting as you keep moving along the trains, right?
Yeah.
With that continual change.
Yeah.
Aron, when we talked with Charlie, we talked about that kind of care planning and finding out in Charlie's first few visits what was important to Angela, what was important to you, and how can, we make sure that we help with that, but also for you to know what's important to Angela. And I think that relates quite closely to the advanced care plan, all those discussions around, what does Angela want if something changes for her medically? Does she want to go to hospital? Does she want to remain at home and move to comfort cares? Did you have those conversations with Angela, and how did they go?
So I think when it came to the practical side of things, Angela was very open, and talking about her funeral and things like that. She was very open about those things. The emotion sides and talking about the kids and things like that, she found quite hard. But in terms of practical stuff, let's talk about that, because that needs to be talked about. And so, her big thing was I want to be looked after at home. I don't want to go to hospital, and and from my point of view, that was just never an option, and I never thought of an alternative. Do you know what I mean? Like, it was like, well, she'll just be here, and I think, when we talked with Charlie, and I said, look, you kind of shift from husband mode to carer mode, and that's just what I did. There was no like, okay, well, what happens later on when, if she gets really, really bad, like, and you can't look after her. That just wasn't even a thought. It was like, she wants to stay at home. That's what's going to happen, and I'll do everything that I can to make sure that that happens. But yeah, we were pretty, she was pretty, like I said, when it comes to practical conversations about what do I want and how do I want things to happen, there was no issues, and she was more than happy is probably not the right term, but she was comfortable having those conversations, which, for me, like I just can't thank her enough for, for that, because I'm a kind of logistics kind of brain type person where we've got a plan and we've got these steps and we're going to go through them all. And, her recognizing that and being able to go, this is what I want you to do, and this is what I need you to do for me, was massive. Yeah.
And people often do talk about that. It's like, thank you, Mum. You left us a plan.
Yeah.
Thank you, whoever.
Yeah.
For letting us know what you want, giving us a plan. It's good. We used that term roadmap before. Steering you through. I think it's, the comment that you made about it, much more difficult to have done perhaps the legacy stuff for the kids for the future. And, it's wonderful that you had that conversation about that.
Yeah. Like in the end, we didn't get videos, but we, Cherie was actually meant to sit down with her. Unfortunately, when they were about to do it, Cherie got COVID and had to go home. So a friend of mine sat with Angela for a good couple of hours and wrote cards for the children. Angela obviously couldn't write, and my friend had to kind of decipher what she was trying to communicate, but we have cards. So I have a card. My boys, Angela's stepsons, they each have a card, and the girls have, and they had a next birthday card. They've got a 21st card. They've got a first baby card. They've got a first wedding card, and things like that. And they're, thankfully to Charlie, they're locked away in a fireproof box, because I told Charlie about these cards. And she said, where are they? And I said, I've just got them at home in a plastic bag. She said, what if the house catches fire? I was like, well, great, Charlie. I hadn't thought about that. So I went straight away and bought this fireproof box. And so now they sit in there. But
our nurses think of
everything. Yeah,
really. They look, I like to say they're problem focused, because they look for what could potentially go wrong, and then put the solution in.
So I am very thankful that her timing was a little off, but that's okay. But the girls and the boys and myself now have, we now have these cards of, that Angela has written for us. So that was, so that again, she's written these for events that she's not here for, and she knows that she's not going. So to write those things must have just been incredibly
heart-wrenching.
Yeah.
But also there must have been something for her about, this is what I've got to give now for the future, and it will be a lasting gift, eh? Yeah,
absolutely.
Bittersweet moments.
Bittersweet moments. And another facet, in the midst of all of this, I'm thinking Angela's in her 40s. You're both working professionals, raising a young family. All of a sudden, Angela can't work anymore. You're probably having to think about, pulling back from work or giving up so that you can care from her. So how do you manage suddenly going from potentially 2 incomes to whatever happened next?
So I think I've mentioned previously. So obviously, we went to the hospital that day where we very first found out that she had a mass in her brain. And that morning, she was getting ready for work. Well, she never went to work again from that day on. And early on, there were conversations of, 2 weeks after the biopsy, well, you could probably go back part-time and, after 2 weeks, and we'll see how you go. But no, she never went back. From that day, I didn't go back for 3.5 months,
Mm.
and I said this to Charlie when we spoke to her. What my work basically just said, mate, you do what you need to do, and we're here for you, and we'll just see you when we see you. And like, and to my boss and his boss, it's it's probably not that big a deal. It didn't take a lot of kind of thought. They just they might have signed a piece of paper to say, yeah, that's okay. But to us, and I remember getting the phone call from my boss's boss to say, look, we'll see you when we see you. And I remember just wanting to, and I said this to Charlie again, like, I just wanted to take the feeling that was and just give it to him.
Yeah.
Just be like, this is what
that means to us. Yeah.
And what that meant was that she didn't have to go to hospital. She didn't have to go somewhere else. We didn't have to get kind of carers to look after her and things like that, because it meant that I didn't have to worry about money or going to work or any of those things. She could, her and the kids could just be my focus. And and I'll forever be thankful to to those guys for that.
And what it's a wonderful way that employers and organisations can contribute. Like you've described, that you wanted to just let him know what that feeling was, how much it meant. That's such a significant way that they can provide support.
Yeah,
by not needing to do very much, eh?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah,
100%. And at the time, like, it's not like I'd been there for years. I think I'd been there 18 months. So in the grand scheme of things, did they owe me that? Not at all.
Good on them.
But again, just like a small gesture that actually had just this wide-ranging impact. That allowed us to spend, in the grand scheme of things, was a very small amount of time, but we got to spend as much time possible with her because of what they did. So yeah.
Because that job insecurity or the financial insecurity or the financial strain, because you've had to give up work, or you're balancing, like you said, do I work to pay the bills or spend my time with my loved one?
Something we see often, hey?
Yeah. What's your role in that, Trish?
Well, I guess our role in that is to help people. Well, first, I think if we talk about that whole admin journey, right? The planning journey is how you save money, by actually getting your head around what all of that is as you're coming down that train track towards that space. And, people, if people have not accessed maybe work and income support ever in their lives before, that's another arena to navigate. And to factor in. And just that $5 part charge on a prescription, for some whānau, that can really tip things over the edge. And so we do see people who are needing to maintain, as active a work life as they can, particularly if they've lost income from the home. Continence products cost people. All sorts of things cost people.
Yeah, and I mean, in the money world, like, I remember, like, the insurance situation, the life insurance situation, and we got the initial diagnosis was 18 months to 2 years, where you can't claim on insurance until I think it's maybe 6 months.
Okay.
And so we were like, okay, well,
that's no help.
That's not really any help, but okay. And then there's the KiwiSaver stuff, and and there's all that admin side of it as well, that okay, well, now I've got to kind of chase that up, and there's just all these things again that you just don't think about.
And people ask questions like, what's probate, what's intestate, how come I couldn't get the money from Dad's account straight away? I didn't know I was going to have to front load the cost of the funeral before, the money would be released from his account. And so, Esther, how do we navigate that? By trying to raise people's awareness about that that, you know, these are things that we're going to have to think about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And sometimes that starts before they enter hospice care, hey?
Yeah.
Because, you know, in hospice, when somebody gets admitted to service, that we'll introduce them to the advanced care plan. We'll try and have a conversation about power of attorney and get the lay of the land and give advice on that. And the social workers, you guys play such an incredible role in advocating for and supporting patients of whānau through that journey.
Through the systems, right?
Yeah.
It sounds like, Aron, you guys had such incredible supports around you in your network. And so sometimes I think a social worker will have really minimal behind the scenes. And other times, you know, they're taking people to help advocate for them with income.
Well, you know, I mean, I thought about one of your team the other day who really did actually literally take someone to work and income to help, because, you know, for that person, it was a frightening system.
Yeah.
Just getting the appointment sometimes, you know, this is not to bag work and income. Yeah, but, you know, it's a system that yet again people don't know about, that you have to find out about while you're doing everything else that you're doing. Yeah.
And we talk about the planning for the future, planning ahead. In Angela's situation, you know, it's a 3 months from admission to hospice throughout. So I think your current role, Trish, also talks to then what we do in the community to support or provide information to people before they get to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same common themes of people unaware of, you know, the things that need to happen and the things that they need to consider. And the same questions come up. And so, you know, we do a lot of public speaking to help with that. And not just perhaps in the aged care sector, but just in general, there's a real growing interest where people are going, I think I do need to know about these things, and where do I get your information from in a way that's easily understandable.
Yeah.
They've got the advanced care plan in Ahiawaka Kokori, so there's a Māori version, recently a Samoan version, and there is a Korean version. So there is quite a lot of uptake. And like I said, it's not necessarily about filling out that document, but it's just the framework for a conversation. Yeah.
And I think the thing that kind of sticks with me, one of the things that sticks with me now is we've just been through all of this. And Angela has had these conversations with people in our family and friends, and, you know, and they're like, yeah, you know what, I need to get that sorted, and I need to do this. Some of them still haven't done that. It's like, you know, what? It is one of those things where whether it's, I don't want to think about it, you know, and until you're actually in that situation and you don't have a choice, it's kind of almost like leaving your assignment till the night before.
Yeah. Just thinking guilty, really, you know. And my dad raised the conversation at dinner the other night, actually. You know, he said, I just wanted to talk to you about, I've revisited my enduring power of attorney, and I wanted to have a chat with you about. And I thought, you know, I'm like, oh, Dad, are you okay? Yeah. He's okay. He just, I guess he just knows he's getting older. Yeah. But it's not just people who are older who die. That's right. As we're
I think we think as well, older people potentially have had this their whole life to plan, which isn't always the case. It can still catch you. I guess I'm thinking with yours and Angela's situation, the fact that she's in her 40s and there's not probably been time to plan, but there's children involved and there's work involved in things that it really, that navigation, that administration side of it, there's so much that comes into this we're not even touching on Angela's medical side of things and her symptoms and how you're going as her carer. There's so much to plan and to think about and consider. I'd wonder how people can work that out without having the networks and friends and things like that.
Yeah, like I you know, like if I look at, you know, some of the older people that I know now, I wonder if it's just, you know, that it's just not something you talk about. Right?
It's part of the problem.
You just don't talk about it, and why would I plan my funeral? A part of it is not knowing how to do it, and especially you know, in a world that's changed so rapidly is in, not knowing how to access any of those things. You can't just, you can't wander down to the post office to pay a bill anymore. It has to be done online and all those kinds of things. So, does that add some complexity into it of, well, okay, I do want to do those things and I know that I have to do them, but I have no idea how to do them, because it's not something I've had to think about.
And of everything I've got going on in my life, whether it's dealing with a life-limited condition or actually going to work every day and managing my full-time job and children, it's probably at the end of the to-do list, the lowest of the priorities, and something that we put off, whether we want to address it or not.
And I think an interesting thing is the amount of times I do hear from caregivers, and similarly you said so, Aron, too, similarly, that actually the sense of almost fulfillment or achievement or pride in self or something for thinking I did that and I achieved that for my family member, for my loved one, the way that they wanted it done. I a couple of people I once spoken to, a woman said, I couldn't do it. I just didn't think I could be able to do it.
Yeah.
And then just like, I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you just, I'm making an assumption here, but 9 times out of 10, you don't have a choice.
Yeah.
It's, there's this 5-day period between the time that they pass away and the time that, that the funeral is. You got to organize everything. And, and we were, Angela was hands-on, right? Whereas I think, a lot of people, I don't want to talk about it.
Yeah.
So I'm just going to leave it, and whatever happens after I'm gone,
But don't you do this?
Yeah. Well, yeah, that's the thing, right? And like I said, when, just even down to dressing her, like it wouldn't have been what I chose. And, but I'm thankful that she was like, this is what I want to wear. And this is, these are the songs I want to play, and all of those kinds of things to make it. And I think what it did was it made it about her, and it had, like you knew that it was Angela's funeral, and then like lots of people came up to me afterwards, and they were like, oh, when we started singing, I could just picture her up there just looking down, just be like, you idiots, look at you all singing this song for me. And yeah, she would have loved it, but that's also in essence who she was. And Angela and I went to a funeral a month or two after she'd been diagnosed, and it was for elderly person.
How did that feel?
Well, look, I said to her a number of times, I said, are you sure you want to go to this? Again, I couldn't, like that's kind of, and at the time when we went, like, I don't, we didn't kind of go as like let's go and see, like a scouting mission kind of thing, like information gathering. Yeah, it wasn't anything like that. That kind of happened by,
curiosity.
Yeah. But no, she was like, no, absolutely, I want to go. And I think, and the thing that came out of it was when we left, she knew what she didn't want, and so she was like, that's not where I want to go. And I think that kick-started the whole, this is what I want, this is how I want this to go, which it's kind of a weird scenario, but I think it was the kickstart to get things kind of going.
It's a really important reflection on the more we can talk about it and think about it, because ultimately death is inevitable for all of us. We don't know how, we don't know when, but it is something that could happen or that will happen. And so to be able to have these conversations and actually talk with our loved ones and maybe set a few things in place to prepare ourselves, and most importantly prepare our loved ones, to empower them to make decisions that they know we would want, is really, really, really important.
I'm thinking about, early on in our discussion, you mentioned about, that transparency with the children.
Yeah.
Yeah. and just how pivotal. Could you talk about that?
Yeah, and well, and kind of following on from what Esther just said, like if something was to happen to me today, I have a 21-year-old, an 18-year-old, 17-year-old, and a nearly 11-year-old. Am I leaving that up to them? It'd be amazing. I mean, it would certainly be talked about. Definitely. But again, it kind of following on from, Angela didn't feel, didn't want me to be kind of burdened with the responsibility of planning things. How could I do that to them? And so I already have one. I have a funeral plan, and the form that I filled in, at the top of that form, it says, this is to help, relieve the stress from my family for having to make decisions, again. And I think part of that is to kind of counter that whole, why did you do that?
Yeah.
And we, in terms of the kids, like the casket was at home, and it was set up in the lounge. And again, there was all these people came to put their handprint on, and Taylor, my 11-year-old, was conducting it. Right, okay, everyone, you have to come over here and you have to get, I'll paint your hand and you choose the color and things like that. So they were, they were a part of it. And the other part was, initially Angela had said, "Why, I don't want to be at home. When I pass away, I want to go to the cottage and things like that." As it got closer, the kind of protective person in me was like, I don't want her to go. I want her to be here. So I said to her, I said, "My love, do you think that it would be okay if you stayed here?" And she said yes. And so there was a 3-day period where she was at home, and so the kids could go and talk to her and go and see her. And I think because there was because we never hid anything from them. Because it was they were just they were part of the journey. The whole way.
They know. Like Taylor knew something's going on, and potentially what was going on in her head was quite different to what was actually going on. So to be open and honest, protect them still, but to bring them on that journey, I think probably is really important.
I love the way, Angela wanted her casket decorated, people to lay hands, and that gave space for Taylor.
Yep.
As you said, to orchestrate that and be active in the way that was right.
Yeah.
For her. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Thank you for being so open with us, but also talking to us about how the conversations that you, Angela, and the rest of the family were able to have that sound like, although they were so challenging and confronting and emotional, they were also very helpful and I imagine healing in some ways as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
We'll end it there. Yeah, Trish, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for sharing. Wow.
Thank you for being here. It was awesome.
It's a pleasure. To wish you all the best too.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And in the next episode, we'll be joined by Cherie, who is Angela's sister and played a really important role in supporting Angela and Aron through their journey. And I can't wait to hear from her. Thanks for joining us.